The security camera notification pinged at 3:17 a.m. Dubai time. I was half asleep. Laptop still open on the hotel bed. A project timeline glowing on the screen. I reached for my phone thinking it was a package delivery. Maybe the new router I'd ordered before the trip. It was not a router. The footage was grainy in that greenish night vision way, but clear enough. My father stood on my front porch holding a crowbar. Not a metaphor. An actual crowbar, the kind you buy at Home Depot for $19. He swung it twice. The first swing dented the lock. The second one popped the door open. The door I had painted sage green the summer I moved in. The summer I'd spent 4 weekends choosing between sage, whisper and eucalyptus mist, because for the first time in my life, I was picking a color for something that belonged only to me. My mother stood behind him holding a black garbage bag. Not the small kitchen kind, the big contractor kind. The kind you use when you're clearing out a room. Behind them, parked at the curb with the engine running, my sister sat in the passenger seat of my father's truck. I could just make out the car seat in the back where my niece Lily was probably sleeping. They moved through my house like it was a liquidation sale. Through the camera, I watched my father tip my bookshelf. My mother opened every kitchen drawer and dumped the contents on the floor. The whole closet got gutted coats, shoes. The vacuum I'd bought on sale 3 Thanksgivings ago, all of it pulled out and piled by the door. And here's the part that got me. The part that made me press my face into the hotel pillow and laugh until my ribs hurt. And the laugh turned into something that wasn't laughing anymore. None of them knew I had sold that house 3 weeks ago. But let me go back, because this didn't start with a crowbar. My name is Megan Shaw. I am 29 years old, and I work as a senior project manager at a tech company in Austin that builds software systems for clients who need things done yesterday. The pay is good. It was not always good. When I bought my house at 22, a 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood south of the city, nothing fancy, just a place with a yard and a door I could lock. I was a junior coordinator, making barely enough to cover the mortgage. I spent 7 years paying it off, 7 years of meal prepping on Sundays, skipping vacations, driving a car with a cracked windshield, because the mortgage mattered more than the crack. The day I got the keys, I called my parents. I was shaking. I wanted them to be proud. My father's first response, before congratulations, before good job, before anything a daughter wants to hear after signing the biggest commitment of her life, was, good. Now your sister has somewhere to stay when she needs it. I remember the way my hand tightened around the phone. The polite laugh I gave him. The kind that covers the sound of something cracking in a place you can't reach. My mother got on the line next. 3 bedrooms is a lot for one person, Megan. You should be grateful you're in a position to help family. Grateful. That word had been following me around since I was old enough to carry things. I was grateful for hand-me-downs that were always slightly too small. Grateful for birthday money that somehow ended up paying for Paige's dental work. Grateful for a seat at a table where I was always the one clearing dishes and never the one being asked how my day went. My colleague Steph, the only person at work who knew the full picture, said something to me that year I didn't understand until much later. We were eating lunch in the break room, and I was telling her about my dad's reaction, trying to make it funny, packaging it into an anecdote with a punchline so it wouldn't have to be what it actually was. She put her sandwich down and looked at me like she was reading a project brief that had red flags on every page. Meg, you can't project manage people into treating you right. Some stakeholders just need to be removed from the project. I laughed. Told her it wasn't that serious. Told her they were just old school. That they meant well. That family was family. For 3 years, that was the story I told myself. Family is family. They mean well. They just don't know how to show it. And then my sister's marriage fell apart. And suddenly my 3-bedroom house became the family's emergency plan. The difference was, this time, I had finally stopped believing my own story. Paige married Travis Kendall the spring she turned 22. I paid for the flowers $800 for peonies that would wilt before the reception ended. Not because anyone asked directly. My mother just called 3 days before the wedding and said the florist needed more money, then went quiet in that way of hers that wasn't silence, but a door held open, waiting for me to walk through it and offer. I walked through it. I always walked through it. Their marriage lasted 4 years. Travis left for a co-worker whose name Paige wouldn't say out loud, just called her that woman at his office. He left behind a 3-year-old daughter named Lily, a lease he stopped paying, and a wife who had never held a job longer than 7 months. Paige moved back in with my parents into the same 2-bedroom house where we both grew up. The one with the water-stained ceiling in the hallway and the kitchen where only one burner worked. Within a month, I started getting calls, not from Paige, from my mother. Your sister is sleeping on the couch, Megan. Lily doesn't even have her own room. And you have 3 bedrooms just sitting there, she said, just sitting there the way you'd describe wasted food at a buffet. Then came the family meeting. My father's words, not mine. He called it a family meeting, like we were a board of directors instead of 4 people who couldn't sit through Thanksgiving without someone leaving the table early. They came to my house. I made coffee, set out mugs, cleaned the kitchen. Old habits. My father sat at my kitchen table, my table, in my house, that I had furnished with a credit card I was still paying off, and laid it out like he was reading a project scope. The irony wasn't lost on me. Family helps family, he said. You have 3 bedrooms, and it's just you. Paige has a child. My mother nodded beside him like she was seconding emotion. A 3-year-old, Megan. She needs stability. She needs a home. I tried. I want you to know that. I tried the reasonable approach, the one I'd been trained to use in conference rooms with difficult stakeholders who wouldn't budge on deadlines. I said I would help Paige find an apartment. I said I'd cover the deposit and first month. I said I could help her update her resume, even set up interviews. I laid it all out. Alternatives, solutions. A path forward that didn't require me to hand over my front door key. My father didn't even let me finish. We're not asking for money, Megan. We're asking you to be a sister. I opened my mouth to respond. My mother cut in. What kind of person says no to a child? Lily needs a room. She needs a yard. You have both. And Paige. Paige sat at the end of the table and cried. She didn't ask. She didn't argue. She didn't manipulate. Not the way you'd recognize it in a movie. Anyway, she just lowered her head and said, I just don't know what to do anymore. And the tears did the rest. They always did. Paige's tears had a higher conversion rate than any pitch deck I'd ever built. Here's the thing about being the responsible one in a family. You don't get to have breakdowns. You don't get to say, I don't know what to do anymore. Because everyone already assumes you know. Everyone already assumes you'll handle it. Your job description got written when you were 12 years old and nobody ever updated it. At 16, my birthday money, $200 from my grandmother, went to Paige's braces. You don't need braces. Your teeth are fine, my mother said. Mine were crooked. They still are. At 22, my parents skipped my college graduation. Paige had a sore throat. A sore throat. My mother said, You understand, right? She can't be alone when she's sick. I walked across that stage, and no one in the audience was there for me. At 25, I lent my parents $8,000 for the family. I found out 6 months later it went to Paige's wedding. The one with the $800 peonies I also paid for. They never paid me back. When I brought it up at Christmas, my father said, You don't charge family interest, Megan. So when my father sat at my kitchen table and told me to be a sister, I had 29 years of receipts filed in a cabinet I couldn't close anymore. But the actual moment wasn't his words. It wasn't my mother's guilt. It wasn't even Paige crying. It was Lily. My father had brought them to my house without asking, without calling. He'd loaded Paige and Lily into his truck and driven over like the decision had already been made, and this was just the move-in. While the adults talked at the kitchen table, Lily wandered down the hallway. I heard her small feet on the hardwood. She pushed open the guest room door, and I heard her gasp the way only a 3-year-old can gasp at a room with a window and a ceiling fan, like she'd found a castle. "Mommy," she called out. "Mommy, is this my room now?" The table went quiet. I looked at Paige. She wouldn't meet my eyes, she had told Lily. She had told her daughter they were moving in before I had said yes, before anyone had asked. Because in this family, Megan's answer was never really a question. My father smiled, leaned back. "See? Even Lily knows this is the right thing." Something behind my sternum shifted. Not broke, shifted. The way a foundation moves a 1/4 inch. And suddenly, nothing is level anymore. I looked at the kitchen I had scrubbed that morning, at the coffee I had made them, at the mugs I had set out, because even now, even in this, I was still the one serving. "Get out of my house." 3 words, the shortest sentence I had ever spoken to my father. His mouth opened. No sound came out. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Megan," my father started. "Out." He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, looked at me the way you look at an appliance that stopped working in the middle of a task. "This is what happens," he said from the doorway, "when you forget where you came from." Paige gathered Lily without looking at me. My mother followed, pausing just long enough to whisper, "Don't come crying to us when you're alone." That night, my phone rang at 9:45. My mother's voice, low and controlled. "Your father says if you don't come around by the end of the month, there will be consequences." I sat on my couch in my quiet house and stared at the guest room door that was still open from where Lily had pushed it. The ceiling fan was still spinning. Have you ever loved your family and been afraid of them at the same time? Have you ever known, down in the part of yourself that doesn't negotiate, that the people who raised you would rather break you than let you say no? Then you know the question I was about to ask myself for the first time in 29 years. Not how do I fix this? Not how do I make everyone happy? But what if the only way to keep this house mine is to make sure it's no longer the thing they're fighting over? My parents didn't call the next day, or the day after that. This was their oldest move. The silent treatment, not the kind that comes from having nothing to say, but the kind designed to make you feel like you've been removed from a system you were never supposed to leave. They'd done it when I was 14, and refused to give up my Saturday to babysit Paige so they could go to a couples retreat. They'd done it when I was 19 and chose a college 2 states away instead of the community college 10 minutes from home. Each time, the silence lasted exactly long enough for me to crawl back with an apology I didn't owe. This time I went to work. I opened my laptop. I tried to focus on a deployment timeline for a client in San Jose who needed their system migrated by the end of Q2. The deadlines on my screen were clean, logical, sequential. Task A led to task B, led to task C. And if someone missed a deliverable, there was a process for escalation. No one called you ungrateful for flagging a risk. I made it to Wednesday before Steph noticed. She didn't ask if I was okay. Steph never asked that. She sat across from me at the cafeteria table with her turkey wrap and said, "You have that look again." "What look?" "The one where you're solving everyone else's problem in your head and pretending it's a work task." I told her everything. The kitchen table. The crowbar comment, though at that point it was just a threat, not a prophecy. Lily in the guest room. The 2-word sentence that had come out of my mouth like something I'd been holding underwater for years and finally let breathe. Steph listened. She ate her wrap. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she put the wrapper down, folded it into a square the way she always did. Steph was the kind of person who folded her trash and said, "How many times have you explained the same boundary to them?" I thought about it. Really thought. 15, maybe 20. And how many times did it work? The cafeteria hummed around us. Someone's microwave beeped. "If this was a project," Steph said, and a stakeholder ignored every boundary, every deliverable, every escalation path, and then threatened you when you pushed back. What would you recommend? I knew the answer before she finished. In project management, when a stakeholder repeatedly refuses to operate within scope, you don't keep sending polite emails, you don't schedule another alignment meeting. You escalate, or you remove them from the project entirely. That's different, I said. Why? Because they're my family. Steph looked at me. Not with pity, Steph didn't do pity, but with the kind of patience that told me she'd been waiting for me to hear my own answer. Meg, your family is the only project where you keep accepting scope creep. And they know it. I drove home that evening on autopilot, pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, sat there. The sage green door looked different in the dark. Smaller, somehow. Or maybe I was the one who'd gotten smaller. 7 years of mortgage payments. And the house still didn't feel like it belonged to me. Not because of the bank I'd paid them. It didn't feel mine because every time I locked that door, I knew someone in my family was already planning when they'd ask me to open it. I thought about the day I signed the closing papers. The real estate agent, a woman named Dana with reading glasses and a firm handshake, had slid the documents across the table and said, "This is yours, only yours." I'd carried that sentence around like a coin in my pocket, rubbing it smooth whenever I needed to remember what ownership was supposed to feel like. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. The dashboard clock ticked past 8. Past 8:15. The porch light was on a timer. It clicked on at 8:30, illuminating the sage green door like a stage light on something about to change. I picked up my phone, scrolled past Mum, past Dad, past Paige, found a different number. "Hi, Dana? It's Megan Shaw. I don't know if you remember me. You helped me buy my house 7 years ago." A pause. "I want to sell it." My voice didn't crack. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my eyes burned in a way that had nothing to do with the porch light, because selling the house wasn't about punishing them. It was about understanding, finally, that this house would never be just mine, as long as my family saw it as theirs. It would always be the thing they were entitled to. The 3 bedrooms they'd already divided in their heads, the yard where Lily would play while Paige lived rent-free, and my parents visited on Sundays like nothing had happened. The only way to make this house truly mine, one last time, was to decide what happened to it. My decision. No one else's. The listing went up on a Tuesday. By Thursday, there was an offer. A real estate investment company, all cash, above asking price, 30-day close. My agent called it a dream offer. I called it an exit. I packed my house the way you close out a project systematically, room by room, with a checklist I wrote on the back of a gas station receipt. Because using a real notebook felt too permanent. Kitchen first. The mugs went into a box I labeled Kitchen Fragile, which was generous considering 3 of them were from the dollar store, and one had a chip so deep it cut my lip every time I forgot which side to drink from. The bookshelf my father had tipped over on camera 3 weeks later. I didn't know that yet. I emptied book by book. Some I kept. Most I donated. Letting go of things was easier than I expected once you started. The guest room was last. Lily's castle. I stood in the doorway and looked at the ceiling fan still turning on low because I'd forgotten to switch it off the night they came. I reached up and pulled the chain. The blades slowed, then stopped. The room went still in a way that felt like punctuation. The real estate company closed fast 30 days. All cash, no inspection contingencies. My agent Dana handled the paperwork. I signed where she told me to sign. I didn't ask who the company would resell to. In real estate investment, properties get flipped through LLCs and holding companies like hot potatoes at a corporate picnic. It wasn't my business anymore. That was the point. One thing I kept. The security camera app on my phone. The cameras were still mounted. I hadn't transferred the utility accounts yet. And the system ran on my subscription until the end of the billing cycle. A loose end I meant to cancel. I didn't. Maybe part of me already knew I'd need to see what happened next. Or maybe I was just bad at cancelling subscriptions. I've never been sure which. The first week after listing, my mother called Sweet this time, the sugared version of Diane Shaw that appeared whenever she wanted something and hadn't gotten it through force. We just want what's best for the family, Megan. Can we talk? I need time, Mum. I was buying time. She thought I was cooling down. I was closing a deal. The second week, my father drove to my house unannounced. I watched from the kitchen window as his truck pulled into the driveway. He walked to the front door, knocked, waited, knocked again. I stood 6 feet away on the other side of the sage green door and did not move. He stood on my porch for 10 minutes, then left. Called me from the truck. You're being childish, Megan. I almost laughed. A man who'd brought a 3-year-old as a negotiating tool was calling me childish. The third week, Paige sent a video. Lily in the cramped bedroom at my parents' house, crying because she wanted the room with the fan. Paige's voice in the background, soft and cracking. See, baby? Auntie Meg's house is so nice. Maybe she'll let us visit soon. The camera lingered on Lily's face just long enough to make sure I understood what I was supposed to feel. Then Paige brought Lily to my office. No warning. No call. I was walking through the lobby after a client meeting when I heard Auntie Meg and 2 small arms wrapped around my left knee. Lily looked up at me with Travis Kendall's eyes and Paige's smile and said, "Can I live with you? Mommy says you have a big house." Paige stood by the reception desk, mascara already running. My colleagues were watching. 2 of them had met my family at the company barbecue last summer. They were doing that thing people do when they witness something private, looking at their phones too intensely. Pretending the lock screen was fascinating, I knelt down, took Lily's hands. "Sweetheart, I love you very much. But that's a grown-up question, okay?" Paige wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry, Meg. I didn't know where else to go." I drove her and Lily to a diner, bought them lunch, drove them home, did not say a word about the house. That night, I sat in my car outside my own front door for 40 minutes. The dashboard clock moved like it was wading through something thick. My thumb hovered over Mom in my contacts. I could feel the pull, the old gravity. The one that had been dragging me back to that kitchen table for 29 years. Then I heard my father's voice in my head. Not the gentle version, the doorway version. "This is what happens when you forget where you came from." And I put the phone down, because I hadn't forgotten where I came from. I'd just finally understood that where I came from didn't get to decide where I was going. That same week, my father sent the text. It was long, written in all caps the way men of a certain generation text when they're angry, every letter shouting, no punctuation, just a wall of uppercase fury. The last line read, "This is your last chance. Either you open that door, or we'll show you what happens to children who forget their parents." My father thought he was sending a warning. He didn't know he was sending a countdown to a door that would never be mine to open again. I read the text twice. Then I did something I'd never done with a message from my family before. I screenshotted it, opened a new folder on my phone, saved the image inside. I named the folder Final Deliverables. The deal closed on a Friday. Dana slid the papers across the same table where she'd sold me the house 7 years earlier. Different pen, same handshake. "Congratulations," she said. "Thank you. Not happy. Not sad. Just done." Like the last line of code in a deployment that took too long and cost too much, but was finally live. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Paige. I didn't tell anyone except Steph, who nodded once and said, "Good." 3 days later, my manager pulled me into a conference room and asked if I could take a 2-week assignment in Dubai. A client needed a system deployment overseen on site. The timeline was tight. The flight was Sunday, I said yes before he finished the sentence. I packed a carry-on, drove to the airport, boarded a plane to a city 14 hours ahead of Austin, 14 hours ahead of my family, 14 hours ahead of every phone call and text message and guilt trip that had ever found me, no matter where I hid. Dubai didn't know my name. Dubai didn't know I had a sister or a niece or a father who owned a crowbar. Dubai was just glass and steel and desert heat and people building things higher than anyone thought sand could hold. I checked into my hotel on Sunday evening. By Wednesday, I had routine meetings in the morning, site visits in the afternoon, room service, and project notes at night. For the first time in months, my phone was quiet. No one was asking me for anything. The only notifications were work emails and a weather app telling me it would be hot tomorrow. And then, on Thursday at 3:17 a.m., the security camera pinged. I opened the camera app expecting a package notification. What I got was a live feed of my father committing a felony. The footage ran in that greenish night vision tint, but the details were sharp. My father on the porch, crowbar in hand, working the lock like he'd watched a YouTube tutorial on the drive over, my mother behind him. Contractor bag in one hand, phone flashlight in the other, not to see, but to give him light. Teamwork. The Shaw family had always been efficient when they agreed on who to take from. The lock gave on the second swing. The door, my sage green door, swung inward and hit the wall. I heard it through the camera mic. A dull thud that sounded nothing like what it was. The end of something. They walked in expecting my furniture. My couch, my kitchen table, the one where my father had told me to be a sister. My bookshelves, my dishes, the vacuum from 3 Thanksgivings ago. They walked in expecting the version of my life they'd already claimed in their heads. The house was empty. I watched my mother stop in the living room doorway. Through the grainy footage, I could see her turn in a slow circle, the garbage bag hanging limp at her side like a deflated plan. She said something to my father. The mic picked up fragments where and everything and gone. My father walked to the kitchen, opened a cabinet. Empty. Opened another. Empty. He moved down the hallway, checking rooms the way you check a building after an evacuation, looking for something that wasn't there anymore. And then he got angry, not the cold anger from my kitchen table, not the calculated anger of the text message. This was the raw kind, the kind that happens when a man who has controlled every room he's ever walked into suddenly finds himself standing in one that has nothing left for him to control. He kicked the wall in the hallway, put his boot through the bathroom door, knocked the towel rack off its mount. My mother didn't stop him. Paige, who had come inside by then, stood in the foyer with her phone pressed to her ear, calling me. I'd learn later, watching her father destroy a house that no longer belonged to any of us. I sat in my hotel bed 14 time zones away and watched it all. 47 minutes of footage. My father dismantling the bathroom. My mother standing in the empty kitchen holding the garbage bag she'd brought to pack my things. Now useless. Now just a woman holding a bag in a house that had already been emptied by someone faster and quieter than she'd ever imagined her eldest daughter could be. There was a moment, I've replayed it more times than I should admit, where my mother sat down on the living room floor. Not dramatically, not crying. She just sat down, cross-legged, in the middle of the empty room, and put her hands in her lap. The garbage bag pooled around her like a dark puddle. She looked small. She looked like somebody's mother. Not mine specifically, just somebody's. And for exactly 4 seconds, I wanted to call her. Then 2 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. The headlights swept across the front windows. My father, who was still in the hallway, came to the living room and looked out. Through the camera, I watched his body language change, shoulders rolling back, chin lifting, the posture of a man preparing to explain himself to whoever was about to challenge him in what he still believed was his daughter's house. 2 men stepped out of the first SUV. Dark suits. No ties. The kind of build that suggested their gym routine was a professional requirement. They walked up the driveway with the unhurried pace of people who have never once needed to rush because everything they need comes to them. One of them stopped at the front door, the door now hanging crooked from its frame, lock shattered, and looked at it the way a claims adjuster looks at storm damage. The other stepped inside. "This property was purchased by our client last week," the first one said. His voice was level and polite and had absolutely nothing warm in it. "You are trespassing. You have damaged his property. We have documented everything. Our client's attorney will be in contact." My father drew himself up. The crowbar was still on the porch steps where he'd left it. "This is my daughter's house." "No, sir," the man said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "It isn't," and there it was. The same man who had swung a crowbar through my lock 20 minutes earlier. The man who had stood in my kitchen and told me what kind of daughter I was. Who had texted me in all caps about consequences. Who had driven to my house with a plan to break in and reclaim what he believed his family was owed. That man now stood on the front lawn with his arms at his sides, shoulders caving inward, chin dropped, staring at the grass between his shoes. The crowbar lay on the porch, steps behind him like a prop from a play he was no longer cast in. My mother pulled him toward the truck. Paige was already inside. She'd gotten in the moment the SUVs appeared. The fastest I'd ever seen her move toward anything that wasn't free. Lily was crying in the car seat. The SUVs didn't follow them. They didn't need to. I closed the camera app, sat on the edge of the hotel bed. The Dubai skyline glowed outside the window. Gold and glass. A city that builds and builds and never once asks permission. I went into the bathroom, turned on the shower, stood under the water for 15 minutes without adjusting the temperature. The water was too hot, and I let it be too hot, because I needed to feel something uncomplicated. Something that was just heat and pressure, and nothing else. When I came out, my phone was on the nightstand where I'd left it. 229 missed calls. I picked it up. The screen was a graveyard of notifications. Mum, 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 dad. Paige, mum, unknown number. Dad. Mum, Paige. Unknown number, unknown number. They'd called in waves, like a coordinated search party that kept splitting up and regrouping. One text message had made it through. From my mother. 5 words. "Save us, please, baby." No caps. No punctuation. No strategy. Just 5 words that were smaller and more desperate than anything Diane Shaw had ever said to me. I read it again, set the phone face down on the nightstand. For 5 hours, I sat in that hotel room and did nothing. Not because I didn't care, because I was trying to figure out the difference between rescuing someone and walking back into a building I'd spent 29 years trying to leave. The hotel room had a window that faced east. I watched the Dubai sky shift from black to navy to a thin line of orange along the horizon. And I still hadn't picked up the phone. 229 missed calls sat on my screen like a project backlog I'd been ignoring. The rational part of my brain, the part that ran timelines and flagged dependencies, was already sorting the situation into categories. Legal exposure. My parents had broken into someone's property and caused damage. Financial liability. The new owner would want restitution. Physical safety. Whoever owned that house now had people in dark SUVs, and my parents were currently sitting in their 2-bedroom house with a broken front door lock and no idea what they'd stumbled into. The other part of my brain, the part that didn't run on spreadsheets, kept replaying 5 words. "Save us, please, baby." I called Steph at 7 a.m. Dubai time. 5 a.m. in Austin. She answered on the second ring, because Steph was the kind of person who slept with her phone on loud, for exactly this reason. "It happened," I said. "The house? They broke in. Crowbar. Destroyed the bathroom. Kicked holes in the walls." A pause. "And the new owner sent people." Steph was quiet for 3 seconds. "What kind of people?" The kind that sit in black SUVs and don't need to raise their voice. Another pause. What do you want to do, Meg? That question, the same one she'd asked in the cafeteria. Not what should you do or what's the smart move, what do you want to do? Like my wants had weight, like they mattered independently of what everyone else needed from me. I don't know. Yes, you do. Her voice was soft but certain. You just don't want it to be the answer. I looked at the orange line on the horizon. It was getting wider. I'm going to help them, I said. One last time. And then I'm done. I hung up, sat with it for another 20 minutes. Then I picked up the phone and called my mother. She answered before the first ring finished. The sound that came through wasn't words, it was the noise a person makes when air and relief and terror collide in a throat at the same time. Then the words came. Tumbling. Baby. Oh, thank God. Baby. We didn't know. We didn't know it was somebody's. Your father just wanted to. We thought you were still baby, please. Mum. Stop. She stopped. The way a faucet stops when you turn the handle all the way, not gradually, just off. Tell me what happened after they left, I said. She told me. 2 men had come to my parents' house that evening. Not the same ones from the property, different men. Same energy. They parked across the street and sat there for 4 hours. Didn't knock, didn't speak, just sat in a black sedan with the windows down. Watching the house. My father called the police. The police came, talked to the men, and left. The men stayed. At 10 p.m., a letter was slid under my parents' front door from an attorney, on thick paper, demanding full restitution for property damage. The number at the bottom had enough digits to make my father's hands shake when he held it. Your father hasn't slept, my mother said. Paige took Lily to a friend's house. She's terrified. We're all terrified, Megan. Please. I closed my eyes, breathed, opened them. I'm going to make one phone call. I'm going to try to fix this. But I need you to hear something first. And I need you to hear it clearly. Because I will only say it once. Anything, baby. Anything. This is the last time I fix something for this family. Do you understand me? Not the last time this year. Not the last time until things calm down. The last time. Ever. The line went so quiet I could hear the air conditioning in her kitchen, the same unit that had rattled since I was 12. The one nobody ever fixed because fixing things was always somehow my job. Megan, you don't mean... I sold that house, Mum, 3 weeks ago. It was mine legally, financially, completely mine, and I sold it. You broke into a stranger's home. You damaged his property. I didn't plan this. I didn't know who bought it, but I am not surprised that you did what you did, because you have been breaking into my life and taking what's mine since I was 16 years old. The birthday money. The graduation you skipped. The $8,000 that paid for Paige's wedding. The guest room you gave away before I said yes. The only difference between all of those times and this time is that this time there were cameras, silence. The kind that has texture thick and heavy. The kind that presses against your eardrums. My mother started to say something. We didn't. Mom, I have the footage. The silence came back. Heavier this time. I let it sit. In project management, there's a technique called strategic silence. You state your position, and then you stop talking. Because the first person to speak after a hard truth is usually the one who folds. I'd used it in conference rooms with difficult clients. Using it on my mother was not something I'd rehearsed. I didn't wait for her to fold. There was no victory in this. Just clarity. I'll call the owner's attorney. I'll try to negotiate, but the restitution comes out of the money from the sale. Do you understand what that means? The money from the house you wanted me to share, that money is going to pay for the damage you caused when you tried to take it. I could hear her breathing. Short, shallow breaths. The breathing of someone who has just realized that every move they made led them to exactly this place. I called Dana, explained the situation in the most clinical language I could manage, words like property damage and prior owner contact and good faith resolution. Dana connected me to the purchasing company's legal department. They connected me to the attorney representing the current owner. The attorney's voice was measured, precise, and entirely without warmth. I introduced myself, explained my relationship to the people who'd broken in, told him it was a family dispute that escalated into trespassing, that my parents hadn't known the house had been sold, that the damage was impulsive and not targeted. He listened without interrupting. Then, "My client appreciates the direct approach, Miss Shaw. We'll review the damage assessment and provide a final figure. The individuals outside your parents' residence will be recalled this evening. No promises, no warmth, but the sentence structure told me enough. Dominic Salerno, whoever he was, operated on respect and directness, and I'd apparently provided both. I authorized the restitution from the proceeds of the sale. Dana processed it. I signed the forms digitally from a hotel room in Dubai at 11:30 a.m. local time. I paid for my parents' freedom with the money from the house they tried to take from me. If there's a word for that kind of symmetry, I haven't found it. Irony comes close but doesn't quite land. It's more like arithmetic, the kind that balances perfectly and still leaves you empty. That evening, my father called. His name on the screen looked different now. Smaller. Somehow. The way the sage green door had looked smaller in the dark, I answered, "Megan." His voice was low. Not the kitchen table voice. Not the doorway voice. A voice I'd never heard before, stripped of authority, stripped of certainty. Just a man's name for his daughter. And nothing behind it. He couldn't finish. "I need you to hear this, Dad." My voice was steady. My hands were not. "I love you. I love Mum. I love Paige and I love Lily. But I don't trust any of you, and I won't come back until I do. If I ever do, how long, that depends on you, not me." I ended the call. Set the phone on the nightstand. My fingers were trembling, not from anger, not from fear, from the specific kind of pain that comes with saying goodbye to someone who is still alive, who you still love, who you simply cannot afford to keep choosing over yourself. Dubai skyline doesn't care about family drama. The cranes keep turning. The glass keeps going up. The sand holds what everyone said it couldn't. I sat by the window and watched the lights come on across the city, one building at a time, until the whole horizon was burning. The men outside my parents' house left that night, just as the attorney said they would. I know because my mother texted me a single word, "Gone," and I didn't reply. Information trickled in over the following weeks, the way it does when you've stepped back from a family but haven't fully disappeared. Steph had a mutual friend who lived 2 streets from my parents. Pieces arrived in fragments, like dispatches from a country I used to live in. My father paid a contractor to fix the damage at the property, the door, the bathroom, the walls he'd kicked through. The restitution figure from Dominic Salerno's attorney landed somewhere north of what my parents had in savings, which meant they dipped into their retirement fund. My father, who had spent 30 years as a foreman telling other men how to build things, now wrote a check to repair the things he'd broken in a house he had no right to enter. Nobody in the family talked about it. Nobody called it what it was. Paige got a job. Not a career, a part-time position at a pharmacy 3 miles from my parents' house. The same chain where my mother had worked years ago. She started in January, and by February she was still showing up, which for Paige was something close to a record. Steph's friend mentioned seeing her dropping Lily off at a daycare center on weekdays. Small steps, the kind nobody throws a parade for, but that matter more than parades. My parents didn't call me again. Not because they'd given up. I don't think Gary and Diane Shaw know how to give up. They didn't call because for the first time in their lives, they didn't have a script. Every conversation they'd ever had with me followed the same structure. Demand, guilt, silence, and then wait for Megan to come back. But this time Megan was in a different time zone. And the silence they were waiting out was the only part of the pattern that still worked. Except now it was working against them. I finished the Dubai project 2 weeks ahead of schedule. My manager offered an extension 6 more months. Same client, bigger scope. I said yes the way I'd said yes to the original trip. Fast, clean, without looking back. I found an apartment in Dubai Marina. Small. 1 bedroom. No guest room. The kitchen had exactly enough counter space for a coffee maker and a cutting board, and the balcony was just wide enough for 1 chair. 1 chair was all I needed. The first morning in that apartment, I made coffee and stood on the balcony. The Gulf stretched out flat and silver below. Construction cranes dotted the skyline. Dubai was always building something, always reaching, always turning sand into structure. Somewhere behind me, my phone sat on the kitchen counter. And for the first time in months, it held nothing urgent. No missed calls, no guilt texts, no video of a 3-year-old being used as emotional currency. The only deliverable on my calendar was breakfast. I opened the security camera app one last time. The house on my old street had been repaired. New door, not sage, green, black, matte. The kind of door that says, "This is not the kind of home you walk into uninvited." The yard had been re-landscaped. Someone had planted hedges along the property line. Tall and thick, like a sentence that ends with a period instead of a question mark. I looked at it for a long time. Then I uninstalled the app, watched the icon disappear from my screen, the way you watch a car pull out of a driveway for the last time. Not with sadness exactly, but with the specific stillness that comes after something heavy has been set down. I didn't sell that house to hurt my parents. I sold it because it stopped being a home the day they decided it was theirs to divide. And the last thing I did with it, paying for the damage they caused with the money they wanted me to share, wasn't forgiveness. It was the final entry in a ledger I'd been keeping since I was 16 years old. The balance was 0. Not because they'd paid me back, because I'd stopped counting. Months passed. I'm not going to tell you exactly how many, because some timelines are better left soft around the edges. I was sitting on my balcony one evening. Not alone. There was someone beside me, a man whose name I'll keep to myself, whose story intersects with mine in ways I'm not ready to narrate. He was reading something on his phone. He looked up with that half-smile people get when they've just connected 2 pieces of information that had been sitting in separate folders. "That house in Austin," he said. "The one your parents broke into. You knew beforehand, didn't you? That they'd do it." I looked at him. Held his gaze, the way you hold a card. You're not sure you want to play. The evening call to prayer drifted up from somewhere below a sound I'd gotten used to. A sound that had nothing to do with my old life, and everything to do with this new one. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. Some questions are better left as questions. Because the answer, whichever answer, changes everything. And I had already changed enough. If you're listening to this, and you recognize something, the pattern, the silence, the way your family treats your boundaries, like suggestions, and your sacrifices like obligations, I want you to know one thing. You are allowed to sell the house. Not literally. But whatever it is they've claimed as theirs. Your time, your money, your peace, your guest room, you are allowed to take it back. You are allowed to make the call. And you are allowed to not answer theirs, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started including yourself in the people you love.